The issue with trauma is that it changes the wiring of your brain. You experience your current reality different. You never know what will actually help people to turn the page. A psychedelic experience, a mystical experience, it may be a religious experience. How people respond to it can be more important than the trauma itself. The most important thing is to get people on your side who support you in your journey. A diagnostic system is a completely useless diagnostic system. Psychedelics are really mind-expanding drugs. They give you a new perspective on life. Some people benefit from ayahuasca. People have studied psilocybin for depression and stuff. Data are just beginning to emerge out of the field. The issue of spirituality invariably comes up when you deal with psychedelics. The problem is, though, that spirituality is a forbidden topic in science. There are certain words that you're not allowed to use in a scientific article. One of them is love. Maybe the most important question for us to talk about is stress is part of life. Can't live life without stresses. Stress in some ways good for you because it activates you, gets you to meet challenges, you learn from experience. But when you're stressed, when it's over, it's over. And you have a sense of accomplishment or relief, you have survived, or sorrow because bad things may have happened, but it's sort of the evolution of life. Trauma is an event that overwhelms the mind, the central nervous system, so you get stuck there and your mind is unable to construct a notion that it's over. So in trauma, your bodily systems, your perceptions, your whole organism, as I like to call it, continues to feel like it's still happening. And for some people, it feels like it's happening for the rest of their lives. Yeah.
Your original definition of trauma, you said originally it was related to extraordinary events that were happening.
Well, that wasn't my definition, it was DSM committee.
Oh, sorry. My apologies. Thank you for clarifying. Yeah, the original definition that they had was...
Because the way we originally defined it was, there's an extraordinary event outside of the usual realm of human experience. And boy, that tells you something about how ignorant we were, because trauma is not at all unusual. At least one out of 3 couples engages in domestic violence. At least 1 out of 5 women has been sexually molested at some point. And so trauma is ubiquitous. And sadly, it has become associated with soldiers and war. And indeed, soldiers at war do get it. But so do children who are being beaten up, and men who get attacked, and women who get molested. And it certainly happens. It's part of the human condition. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things you've said, it is way more ubiquitous than we normally give it at first-hand sense to believe. I mean, I even find some people in certain circles using terms like there's big T trauma and little t trauma. Do you think languaging like that is helpful?
Oh, I think that's sort of offensive language myself. Like supposedly little t is supposedly interpersonal trauma, like having somebody chronically humiliate you, put you down, and ignore you. That's not a minor issue. If you're raised and nobody pays attention to you and provides you with food and clean clothing, tells you, I wish you hadn't been born, that's not a little t. That's a huge issue, actually. But so there's something like the event, which is the trauma, and then something else is the environment in which this happens. And the environment in which it happens is hugely important. So what we see right now, let's say, there's a disaster happening in Texas. It's a terrible thing for people, but sooner or later, people will provide them with resources, people pull together, people restore themselves, and human beings are amazingly resilient creatures. And so people can put up with amazing amounts of adversity as long as their community supports them and stays intact. And so what some people unfortunately call little t trauma is about when you're being beaten up by your spouse, which you don't talk about. And if you do talk about it, people go like, I'm not going to get involved in your troubles. Huh? And so the intimate violence, intimate trauma tends to be a very lonely experience, and that makes it a particularly problematic issue.
The loneliness factor is quite an interesting one because you mentioned environment there, but also in our environment, I think I picked up along the way researching for this podcast that you were saying it's actually we are interdependent beings on a really deep level. And actually it's when a traumatic event happens, actually the support that we receive from is actually critically important in determining how the sort of the tail of the trauma goes.
The leadership of a group, the leadership of an organization, teachers, ministers, religious people, they are supposed to be there and help you. And if everybody gathers about you and really helps you, you're likely to calm down enough and to recover from the trauma. So Oprah Winfrey and Bruce Perry wrote this nice book called It Is What Happened to You. But I would say, yeah, it's sort of what happened to you, but even more, who was there for you? And if you suffer by yourself and you get blamed or it's secret, it becomes particularly troublesome. It happens to soldiers also. Soldiers don't get support after terrible things happen. And then they're on their own. And that's certainly true for victims of domestic violence and child abuse. They tend to be by themselves. And that loneliness is a very big issue. Yeah.
I think we've touched a vein there that's currently running through society a little bit, though. Like loneliness seems to be a bit of an epidemic that's on the rise more and more as we go. Have you found this to be the case in your own?
Talk about, huh? And it's really another issue, and certainly not something that I am expert on, unlike people like Jonathan Haidt, is what's happening with our increasingly living through screens. An example I like to give is if you and I were in the same room right now and had this interview, we'd become friends. But I'm meeting you over screen, I got a sort of nice guy, but nothing will come out of you. I think that's the big issue, that hanging with people, getting to know people, spending time together. And so I think Jonathan Haidt is and other people, of course, very correct, that screens have a hugely, to some degree, positive and to a large degree, very negative effect on us. So that's another issue besides trauma, although it always becomes part of the whole thing, yeah.
Yeah, I'm wondering if that further leads us to feeling.
Because there's Zoom, survivors can find other survivors to talk to, which couldn't happen before. So it has certain positive things. Your webcast may help a few people, even though we never get to know each other. It might do them some good, but boy, a personal contact and becoming friends is very different.
Yeah, there's something that's unique about the actual in-person experience. Talking about unique, there's based on our prior dispositions and experiences, certain events, I think it's also difficult when people try to support each other through traumatic events sometimes, because what traumatizes one person may not constitute a traumatizing event in another person's mind, and they don't really fully understand how to support the other person sometimes. Is that, like, what have you found in terms of the uniqueness of the event and the disposition and the experience and, between people?
A lot of people who don't do this work ask all the time. For them, that seems to intrigue them. For me, that's not an interesting question, because just about everybody who I meet with, my reaction is, oh my God, how did you survive that? Huh? And talking about resilience, there's always a little judgmental piece that if that happened to me, I would have been fine. But if you really listen to what people go through, I always go, oh my God, how did you survive? And indeed, some people survive better than other people. But I also like to say that every trauma survivor is resilient in their own way. To my mind, anybody who is willing to go on and able to go on after a gang rape, after your kid gets killed, after some horrendous event. How the hell do people go on after that? So I'm more impressed with what allows people to go on than, oh, what's wrong with you that you continue to have PTSD?
Mm. Can we talk about how people do manage to go on? What are some of the most surprising ways that you find people manage to pull through?
Well, what's impressive is that it's highly individualistic. We give, like I had a podcast with Judy Herman a few days ago about justice. And I gave the example that I know people who went to court, who sued the people who had hurt them, and who won the case, and it basically made no difference in how they felt. And I know other people who went to court, didn't get justice, and still felt great about the fact that they were able to speak their truth, even though they lost the case. So we are, nothing is linear in this world. We are symbolic creatures, and someday something happens, and suddenly you go like, wow, I get it. I'm alive. That may be somebody you meet. It may be a psychedelic experience. It may be a mystical experience. It may be a religious experience. You never know what will actually help people to turn the page.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting. How each person processes each, individually. Trauma actually leaves an imprint in one's brain. You found, right, and it's in the amygdala. You call it the cockroach part of the brain.
See, that's all too simplistic. Now,
Please tell us. Yeah, how does your brain actually change with trauma?
Your brain processes information.
Mm.
So people now think, oh, I'm smart if I use the word amygdala. But, but there's many, many different systems in the brain that get affected by trauma, depending on how old you were when it happened and all kind of other factors. And so the issue with trauma is that it changes the wiring of your brain. So you become a different person after you get traumatized. And so it's not the past that gets affected only, but because of the trauma, you experience your current reality different. And that's the first thing I saw with the Vietnam veterans I worked with. They lost the capacity to love. And so they had kids and they couldn't feel any feelings for their kids or for their lovers. And you could say, oh, it's about the war. No, the issue is that their brain has changed so they can no longer open their heart to somebody else. So it is, the problem with trauma is not the past, it's the present. Or as a close friend and colleague of mine says, living with trauma is like living in a dark room with the light turns off. So you become a different person and you react differently, and your capacity for pleasure, joy, and engagement gets changed because your mind and brain gets changed by trauma.
What are some of the hallmarks of someone experiencing a traumatic response? I can hear that there are some in there that they're disengaged. What are some of the hallmarks that you look for when you see someone having a trauma?
The hallmarks is that you get stuck. So you get stuck in fear, get stuck in rage, you get stuck in not being able to think about anything else, being unable to focus on other things, be able to engage in other things, being able to plot for the future, to really plan and to envision the future for yourself. Yeah.
Yeah.
It also changes your capacity to learn. A very striking thing is, and that's not always true, but many traumatized people, they just have a hell of a time taking new information in. And that their brains don't seem to be equipped to just learn the lessons of every day. And that's how they get stuck.
Yeah, right. Stuckness. Can I ask something about is there a link potentially between between trauma that you found, and you know how some like depression and anxiety, and even some people now there's more mounting evidence that they're finding that you know ADHD is linked to like early childhood trauma and stuff like that, and then but then also ADHD also has this really weird like it has intergenerational sort of 70% likelihood of being passed down.
We're not throwing out a lot of things all at once in one bit.
The question was more, do you see there being a link between trauma and some of these other mental health?
Our diagnostic system is a completely useless diagnostic system. Everybody knows that. I was part of it for a long time. I was part of the committees. And we just sort of put certain symptoms together and said, let's call that a disease. But there's nothing scientific about that. And over the past 30 years, people keep saying, it's no good, let's get a new system. But somehow we're not moving and we keep using the same system. And we pretend like anxiety and depression are two completely different things. And they say they comorbid disorders. No, they tend to go together. And being able to focus and concentrate doesn't mean you necessarily have a disease called the ADHD. It means you cannot focus and concentrate, which oftentimes happens when you're depressed, happens when you get traumatized. And so there's no neat boundaries between all these things.
Inspired souls, living beings, I wanted to take a moment to thank all of you that are subscribed to this podcast. Everything you see around here is powered and empowered by your subscription to this channel. Thank you so much for your incredible love and your support. I cannot thank you enough. To all of you that are not yet subscribed to the channel, please do take a moment and just check that you are subscribed. I've spoken to a few people and they didn't realize that they weren't. So as I'm saying the word subscribe, the button below is lighting up in the colors of the inspired evolution. If it's doing that, you're not yet subscribed, please do hit that subscribe button, hit the bell notification icon, and join this community, supporting love, positivity, and wisdom like this to help enrich your life in deeper and richer ways. Together. Thank you so much for your support. Really fascinating. Can you tell us more about what you mean by that? Because the way that things are diagnosed aren't actually, they're outdated is kind of what I'm hearing from you.
Oh, completely. Well, they were never dated in the first place because I was part of I was a student when people started to think about it, and I was at the right institution. So I participated even as a student. Like, how do we create diagnoses? And we just sort of floundering around and we created some diagnoses, but we never did the science to what the biological variables are and where the boundaries are. And, it's a very messy system. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's interesting as well to sort of hear you say that there's a lot of actually overlap between some of these things that, just sticking a label on them.
I wouldn't even call it overlap. They go together, very depressed and you can't go, and you get anxious also. You get anxious and people will come over, you will be too depressed to engage with them. It all goes together. Anyway.
Yeah. There are one of the things that you there's a lot of different things you've come across where you pioneered some things like treatment for trauma, like in finding EMDR. Like that was really fascinating listening to. Can you explain what EMDR is for the person that hasn't heard of it before? Because you found this to have incredibly powerful benefits.
For me, I call EMDR my own personal gateway drugs. because I've been studying trauma for 15 years already or something, 20 years. And I didn't know how to treat it because talking alone did not make it go away. And then some people in my clinic started to do this crazy treatment where they wiggle their fingers in front of people's faces and the eyes move from side to side. And I said, stop this stuff. This is crazy. It's a stupid thing. And they pretend like they won't do it anymore. And they kept doing it. And they happened to be the smartest people who were working with me. And then I saw some tapes about what EMDR could do for people. It's dramatic changes. They go like, wow, this is weird. Nothing that I do can cause such dramatic changes. And how do you make the changes? By moving your eyes from side to side while you're thinking about miserable stuff. That doesn't make any sense at all. And so we did a study. Still to this day, sadly, the only study that NIH ever funded on EMDR. There's some other European studies also, but the research has never been very extensive. And so we did this research, and indeed, people got remarkably much better. Just and so for me, it was really intriguing. Like here, you have do something that's really weird that doesn't fit within our cultural paradigms. Our cultural paradigm. How do you treat people? You talk and you give them chemicals. Huh? And here you do something completely different, like wiggling your fingers, and people get better. Then I go to China and I see people doing Qigong and Tai Chi, and I see people get better. And I go to Argentina, I see people who are miserable beginning to dance the tango, and they feel better. I said, oh, there's much more to how you reset these systems than our Western yakking and chemical paradigms would imply. And so EMDR was the thing that really opened up my mind that it's okay to study weird stuff. And so I did the first scientific study on yoga. After all these millennia of doing yoga, we did brain scans, we looked modern scientifically, and we found that yoga can be a very effective treatment for trauma. You're like putting your butt in the air and twisting your spine into a pretzel, helpful for yoga. Yeah, it is. So for me, that really invited us to be much more open-minded about what might and might not help people.
Yeah, it's really interesting because you said that talking through your problems has almost little to no efficacy in regards of supporting trauma.
But that's not true either. Like being able to talk about stuff that you feel really ashamed about, that you don't dare to talk about, and you don't dare to reveal it, actually is huge. Being, what you do when you raise kids to talk. That's a very important part about raising kids. You don't put your kids in front of a screen, you actually talk to them. That may be part of the problem in our society right now. And kids learn who they are from the way you treat them. And you talk with your kid. And you say, that really made me mad. Oh, what did he do? Oh, that made you mad. What did you want to do? I wanted to punch him. Good for you, but you can't punch him. But you can tell him that you didn't like what he did to you. And so you discuss it together, and that gives you a sense of who you are, and it gives you language. And I think finding language is tremendously important. It doesn't cure you, but knowing who you are and what's going on with you is very important. And finding somebody who non-judgmentally, in a warm and supportive way, can help you to talk about yourself is an important aspect of getting better.
Right. And I'm imagining it also back to what we were talking about, the interdependency of the human condition. It actually supports, one being like feeling connected and seen and heard. Yeah. Back to the yoga piece for just a quick sec. I think you said you found it to be almost more effective than medication in some ways for PTSD support.
Well, in fact, I did the first study on Prozac and of Zoloft for PTSD, and they were not useless. Period. It didn't work very well, but they were not completely useless. But unfortunately, psychiatry got stuck on drugs and stopped exploring what might be helpful. And so, medications, by and large, it's worth a try. It might help you, but it's probably not going to solve your trauma. You may function a little bit better. You may not get quite as upset. And so you may be able to function better. But then you should do the work of dealing with the trauma. So if you get stuck on medication to just help you to manage making it through the day, that's not good enough.
Can you tell us about the Shakespeare movement? I came across this. This was really interesting about theatre and movement and criminals and can you tell us a little bit about the Shakespeare movement?
Well, I happen to be a big Shakespeare fan, in part because I was not raised on Shakespeare, because I'm a Dutchman by origin. Um, but I got very intrigued with Shakespeare, as many people have, for really understanding the human condition unbelievably well. Shakespeare just knew about trauma. He knew about tyrants. He knew about what happens with people who are in our current political situation. Um, he knows about love. He knows about betrayal. He knows about loyalty. He knows about human cruelty. It's all there. And so he's really is an extraordinary, unbelievable mind and stuff. And so that's one piece. The other piece is that, so I started to hook up with Shakespeare programs in my neighborhood, and they do Shakespeare with high school students, and they do Shakespeare with criminals. And they teach kids and traumatized people how to inhabit a certain role. And that's a little bit similar to my going to medical school at one point. And I didn't know anything, and people gave me a white coat and they gave me a stethoscope, and suddenly people call me doctor. And I look around and say, where's the doctor? Oh, they must be talking to me. Um, and after a few years of studying very hard, actually, I grew into my role as a doctor, and I became a reasonably decent doctor by acting like a doctor for a long time, you know. And that's what happens when you join the service. You're just a kid, and you learn to march, and you learn to hold a rifle, and when it's over, you get, I'm a soldier. And so people get a certain identity, and a lot of traumatized people get an identity of, I'm a veteran, I'm an incest survivor, I'm a rape victim. That's one identity. And that's what keeps them trapped. And so for me, theater is a beautiful way in which we can all experience this, but it's like to be somebody else and to really inhabit that role. And certainly my acting teachers were very good in helping people to assume the posture and create a tone of voice to really inhabit something else. And so they have this program here in my county in Massachusetts called Shakespeare in the Courts. And if a juvenile delinquent commits a crime, the judge says to him, you have a choice. I can either send you to jail for 4 months, or you can go and become a Shakespeare actor and join Shakespeare in the Courts. I live in a very civilized part of the world, actually. And then these kids learn how to play roles. And now they are acting the role of a mighty king. So, oh, that's what it feels like to be mighty king. And then act the role of a person who has been terrible things to. And you feel that. And you act another role, and you feel another thing. And you really get to become internally much more flexible about the roles that we all habitually inhabit. And that is a very core issue that keeps coming up, is that we live in our habitual brains. And when you get traumatized, your habitual brain, called the default mode network technically, gets stuck on, I'm a helpless traumatized person. And that becomes your habit with which you move through the world. And so what's critical in order to overcome trauma is to learn new habits of how you move, how you experience yourself, how you breathe, how you pay attention, etc., etc. So our next book is called Come to Your Senses. It's very much how you can overcome trauma by learning to really feel what you feel and know what you know, and coming to a certain new relationship to that creature who you are. Yeah.
It's interesting, this come to the senses piece, because feel what you feel and know what you know.
That's right.
I mean, oftentimes when you're going through certain feelings, I've had the experience myself. People try to psychoanalyze your feelings and almost trying to help you move through them faster than you actually need to. Like, you don't get permission to really feel what you're feeling.
Yeah, right. And that is not the easy thing to do, and it takes time. And if your insurance company says you have 6 sessions, that's like that's bullshit. Like,
Yeah, it's It's interesting. What impelled you to write the new book, Come to Your Senses? So the body keeps the score on one hand, but then the other one's to come to your senses. Can you tell us a little bit more about the motivation behind Come to Your Senses?
One after another, had it, but we really discovered it's where mindfulness comes in, and learning to pay attention to yourself, and learning to feel what you feel, and giving yourself the things that you need in order to move, and finding out what those things are. And so somebody else cannot impose that on you. Somebody can say, you may want to look into that, or have you ever tried this? But when I meet with people, I always do an extensive inventory of what has helped them and what's given them a sense of pleasure, a sense of mastery, a sense of competence, and what have they discovered already. And then we like to find out what can they do to discover some more things about what they can do and what gives them a sense of aliveness. Yeah.
This podcast is brought to you by my one-to-one mentorship. The podcast is designed to inspire your evolution onwards, upwards, and inwards. And if you're ready to dive in even deeper and evolve your career, your leadership, and business in a conscious direction, and you believe that alignment to your purpose and your soul's direction is the only way to truly thrive into your highest potential, and right now you can feel that guidance, mentoring, and coaching would be of support, then my one-to-one mentorship, coupled with our incredible conscious group masterminds, is here for you. Thousands of people have evolved through my mentoring over the last 10 years. It is, after all, my highest calling, and here's what they have to say about how it's transformed their life.
I've had massive transitions while working with Amrit.
I'm processing things in real time. I'm addressing what I want to do, and so much more is possible.
Amrit sessions were really helpful. They inspired me to go after my dream job, which I have now, and I'm loving it.
Amrit doesn't really see it as just coaching, but he honestly cares about you, and you can feel it. That's just priceless. I just love it.
If you're looking for someone to help you evolve as a person, hands down, Amrit.
So if you're ready to dive in even deeper to take your inspirations and truly evolve, then make your way over to my website at amritsandhu.com. I'll put a link in the description below. You don't have to go it alone. There's one-to-one mentoring and an incredible community mastermind of conscious leaders, entrepreneurs, and people transforming their careers and business into full alignment with their soul's highest calling, creating a life that inspires them on the deepest level, living into their greatest impact. And as many of you know, connection is my highest value, so I'm looking forward to connecting with you. Use the button below, use the link below, amritsandhu.com/call. That's AMRIT Sandhu, SANDHU.com/call. It's on screen for you now. And if you follow that link, you'll be able to book in a call directly with me. I'm looking forward to connecting with you. So go on, I'll see you there. It's interesting because what I'm hearing in there, there's an underlying sort of self-permission that people need to give themselves to sort of feel and experience what. And I know self-compassion is a huge piece of your work.
And still, the permission doesn't come from me. The permission comes from them.
Yeah, self-permission. Yeah,
give them self-permission.
Exactly.
Go to these places, yeah.
It's interesting because then also you've mentioned habits earlier, and I think people often, when they hear habits, they feel like, discipline gets conflated into the frame. It's like when you get into, it's like, new habits, and it's like, okay, I just need some discipline. But I've been finding recently, maybe just through this podcast, that discipline and self-permission sometimes are two very different things. Like you can discipline your way into things, or you can give yourself permission into spaces. Discipline's kind of beating yourself over the head, trying to get yourself to change. They're two very different things, but yet you mentioned habits. Can you unpack that a little bit for us?
Well, I think, we all get stuck in our habits, and then we need other people to say, oh, are you willing to cook tonight? And you say, I don't know how to cook. And somebody says, well, there's a cookbook over there, and let's go shopping. Why don't you sort of try out what you can do? That's it. We need people in our lives that sometimes they're therapists, sometimes they're coaches, or your karate instructor, or your tennis instructor, or your music teacher, or whatever, who helps you to to create more options for yourself, to explore the world. But generally, we need people who are examples for us and who inspire us to do that. And so that's if you want to become a tango student, you have a teacher who teaches you how to become a tango dancer. And that's true for playing the cello or the drums or whatever. You need somebody to help you to create that new capacity. Yeah.
Right. So having someone that's inspiring for you to fall into sort of their templates and habits can be extremely supportive.
Yeah, supportive, but who gives you the courage and the example of where you can go and what you might be able to do. And so the person who really is helpful to us is a person who makes us curious about ourselves by being curious about us. What happens inside of you when you do that? What makes it hard for you to go there? What makes you feel so judgmental about your efforts when it's good enough, and to really help you to explore yourself. Yeah.
What are some of the more toxic things that, I'm still kind of considering discipline and people sort of trying to, telling each other just to shake it off, or, what are some of the more toxic things that you think people...
It happens all the time. And I hear stories like that every day from people. My kid dies, and after 2 weeks, people say, "Oh, get over it, move." Too late. Of course, the worst thing you can do for somebody, you can say, "Yeah, take your time, do it." And the more you give people time, the better they do. I think a very good example of that. I studied people who wake up from in the middle of surgical procedures. So unbelievably horrible thing to happen. Have people operate you, and you become conscious, and the anesthesiologist does not notice that you're awake, but your body is paralyzed. And so it's really traumatic. And what we found is that the people who went through that experience, who told their surgeons, "I was awake," and the surgeons say, "Oh, it's not true, just get over it, you're just making it up," they all did terribly, and they all sued their doctors. And everybody who's surgeon says, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. How can I help you? What can we do for you? This is a terrible thing." None of them sued their doctors, and all of them got better.
Wow. Sorry, I'm just trying to picture him waking up in the middle of surgery there. It's quite confronting. You mentioned that time is this, and there is this saying in our society that time heals all wounds. Is time a major therapist?
No, that's the damn thing, is that, yes, if your heart is broken in a love relationship, which happens to most of us, it's very painful. But at some point, we do get over it. And for those situations, time will heal the wound. But that's the damn thing with trauma. Trauma doesn't heal the wounds. And in fact, earlier, one of my articles back in the 80s was already, "When time does not heal the wound."
Yeah, so trauma keeps the wound open. And also... can I ask about, let's just say that doctor example, the one where they said, "Oh no, you're still sleeping." Like, "Oh no, you must have still been under anesthetic." It's not true. Yeah. Is that obviously there's an initial trauma of like waking up in the middle of your surgery, but then is that like a secondary trauma where, because you said initially we're like interconnected and we're looking for that connection and that validation, then someone else is like further disconnection, further separation from our truth. And is that like a secondary trauma?
That is the second. It's interesting that I haven't heard people talk about it for a very long time, but when we first created the diagnosis of PTSD, the issue of secondary trauma came up all the time. Actually, people had talked about secondary trauma before we had a diagnosis in the textbooks, and they said, and somebody already a long time ago has said, how people respond to it can be more important than the trauma itself. To be raped and not to be believed. The not to be believed is as traumatic or more traumatic than the rape itself.
Yeah, wow. That's that's something to consider, isn't it, in terms of how we approach each other and support each other through these processes. The word re-traumatizing gets used quite a bit. Can you explain what it means to be re-traumatized by something? Because people, I'm not.
Yeah, stuff happens to people all the time. All of us. Life's never easy for anybody. But if you have gone through a trauma, a particular situation that for other people may just become, oh boy, that really sucked, that's unpleasant, becomes for you a new reliving of that helplessness of your trauma. Yeah. And that's what happens a lot actually. When you're traumatized, you tend to become very sensitive to all kinds of things. So things that after that are just unpleasant, inconvenient, or difficult experiences, for you may become paralyzingly difficult.
Yeah, is some of the playing out of it again just in the mind, or do you actually see physical patterns of behavior being mapped out again? Because there are some statistics like if you've been raped once, you're more likely to be raped again.
That's true.
Have you given some thought to what's actually going on there?
See, I'm always impressed how many people say, "Oh, does your old memory come back?" No, the memory doesn't come back. The reaction comes back.
So it's a physical pattern.
So you react in the same way as you did before. And so somebody may be rude to you, and most of us will say, "Boy, that's a rude guy. What an asshole." When you get traumatized, you may get all stirred up and want to kill that person, and it becomes preoccupied. It's not that you remember what happened to you before, but you react to what's happening right now as if the old thing is happening again, and you act in the way that you wish or should have reacted to the original thing to otherwise things that may be quite irrelevant right now.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, the patterns and what gets played out. Talking about the patterns, one of the, I guess back to that sort of track that we were on with EMDR, yoga, theatre, neurofeedback. Can you tell us about what is neurofeedback? Because it sounds quite cutting edge. Is it cutting edge? What's going on with neurofeedback?
No, it's actually, I wish it were, but it's been around for quite a long time. And I'm actually disappointed that it has not taken better hold. I've been quite involved in it. I did a bunch of research projects on it, as did some of my colleagues. And neurofeedback is really interesting. You can actually learn to play computer games with your own brainwaves. And so you can set up a program where you can harvest your own brainwaves. And if your brain makes sort of wave patterns that are helpful for you to focus and to concentrate and be calm, little sounds get played, and a deer jumps out of the forest, and the colors change, and sort of lively, and so the computer says to you, "Oh, this is fun." And the moment your brain makes the waves that are not helpful for you, the screen goes blank. And you go like, "Hey, I don't want to look at a blank screen." And you try to do something, and suddenly it starts moving again. And so the computer gives you feedback about, that's the right brainwave. But that's not something you can control. So the computer can sort of coach you, push you into making better brainwaves. And when you walk out, you feel like, I feel more focused, I feel more calm, I feel more in tune. And so the brain can be trained to make more adaptive brainwaves. And if all my dreams come true, or even some of them, every school system in America would have a neurofeedback station for if kids get a lot of traumatized kids in America. If kids come to school and they cannot pay attention and they are disruptive and unpleasant, you can go sit in front of the computer, calm your brain down, be focused, and you go to the classroom and you can be a member of the class.
Yeah, the fascinating thing about that is you probably do it like a handful of times or a dozen times, and you actually start to understand what a regulated self and a dysregulated self actually start to feel like.
Yeah, but the word understanding isn't quite right. These are automatic behaviors. It's not like, I think most people I talk to still think that that little man sitting over here who can talk is in charge of you. No, that's the part of you that can talk. But that's, if I say to you, I don't want you to get sleepy for the next 5 days. And you say, okay, I'm not going to get sleepy for the next 5 days. You can wish all that you can, but you're going to get sleepy. And if I say to you, hey, how about not going to the bathroom for the next 5 days? I'll try. But those parts of your brain have a life of their own, and you have no control over them. Well, the example I like to give is, have you ever tried to talk a friend out of getting married to somebody who you knew would be a disaster for them? And many people I know have, including myself. It never works. You cannot talk people into or out of intense emotions. It's what you have. Yeah.
Yeah. It's is a lot of it got to do with our nervous system?
It has everything to do with our nervous system. Yeah, that's right.
And so being able to learn to release, let go, just come back into harmony with our nervous system, that's what's underpinning most of, and that's why the body.
Even that is too simple, because your brain already has changed. And so you have a different brain. And maybe we can help you to use the new brain you have more productively. What we find in neurofeedback is if you try to train people who have been traumatized to have a normal brain, you usually screw them up.
Oh.
Actually, you need to coach the brain to get patterns that help for you.
Into a new direction.
For me, yeah.
Yeah, fascinating. Talking about changing the mind, we've landed here in the conversation. Psychedelics for trauma work. I mean, yeah, there's the Michael Pollan book, How to Change Your Mind, which, very well received.
Of course, it's interesting about Michael's book. He's a great guy, but he doesn't write about how his mind was changed. He talks about what it's like to take psychedelic drugs. I'm still waiting for his wife to write the book, say how my changed psychedelics. Because we're never very good judges of ourselves. But your kids will say, Dad, you're so much more mellow. So no, I'm not.
Speak for yourself. Yeah, interesting. The first psychedelic you found that had some significant efficacy was MDMA.
Absolutely. We still don't know how it changed people's minds. Because what we studied on MDMA was mainly the side effects, so that we could legalize it for therapeutic purposes, and for that we had to show that it was safe. And we sure did. One of our papers won one of the awards of the journal Science, of one of the 10 most important scientific breakthrough in all of science for the year. And then our research was examined by the FDA, and they said the side effects outweigh the benefits. That is completely not what our study found. The benefits far outweighed any side effects. In fact, there were no serious side effects. So that was another sort of weird thing that you have come to expect from the Trump area of American politics.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Because that's quite interesting. Why would something that is so supportive be suppressed?
Well, I have some sympathy for it because, when you're a parent, I think one of the biggest fears of parents is that their kids will become drug addicts. Mm. And so to say you should take a drug to get better after having been telling your kids you shouldn't take drugs is a bit of a leap to take. We had a law proposal in Massachusetts, a plebiscite, to do that, and I was in the news and wrote an editorial, and it was voted down, and I was not surprised because it takes a pretty complex understanding of the mind that sometimes something that you're worried about might actually be helpful.
Inspired souls, lumen beings, what are you taking away from today's incredibly rich conversation with Dr. Bessel van der Kolk? Is it the definitions of trauma and what constitutes in trauma and re-traumatizing and the neuroplasticity in the brain around what's going on? Or is it the 6 different ways you can actually heal from trauma? Or is it the conversation around medications? What are your biggest takeaways from today's podcast? I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Join in on the conversation and let us know. Dr. Bessel van der Kolk is likely to be back in the future, and I'd be honoured to ask any questions you have if you leave them in the comments below on your behalf in the future as well. Back to Dr. Bessel van der Kolk in today's episode. Yeah, it's interesting though, because like you said earlier in the conversation, like you were pointing to certain medications that are prescribed, like Zoloft and stuff like that, and they have a certain level of efficacy. But then you're finding, if treated with, and that's a drug, if this was treated with, MDMA is also, a drug and therapy. But yet one is widely promoted, whereas the other one is, still.
One of them some of them are mind-altering substances, and others are sort of mind-suppressing substances. So we're really more comfortable. It was interesting that the word mental health, which I grew up in, got changed into behavioral health. Behavioral health means don't be a pain in the ass.
Conform. Yeah, it's conformity.
Weird. It's all, are you being a difficult person or not? Let me give you a drug so you can conform and not cause any trouble. That's not really what psychedelics drugs are for. They're really mind-expanding drugs. They really give you a new perspective on life. And that's, I'm also, I'm not feeling frivolous about psychedelic drugs. I think they're very powerful agents, and I'm worried that once they get legalized, that people will do the same thing as what happened in the 60s, and people will use them all the time under uncontrolled conditions, and you'll see all kinds of side effects. They're powerful agents for good and ill, and we happen to study them under extremely careful conditions.
Can you describe the controlled conditions for us, for the listener?
The conditions were that we get to know people very well. They have 2 therapists who they meet with for very long periods of time. When they take MDMA or in their substance, they come in for a whole day. There's no interruptions. 2 people are with them the whole time. At the end of the day, somebody can bring their dog or their lover can come in. They can stay overnight. The next day, the therapists come back and talk extensively about what the experience was like. So we spend an enormous amount of energy on processing what happens during these experiences so that people really, their mind actually grows because they have therapeutic contacts. People had dramatic changes. We just had the psychedelic conference in Denver with very large numbers of people. And some people actually who were in our study put up a symposium where they talked about their own experience. And they talked in great detail how what we actually put in the papers didn't begin to cover the astonishing internal changes that they had gone through. For example, one of the panelists is a cardiologist who felt chronically suicidal, very bad trauma history. And she said, I always was a cardiologist, but now because of MDMA, I'm also a heart doctor. Because I can work with the heart, and my heart was opened. So heart has 2 different meanings, and she got the other meaning of heart because of the MDMA.
Wow. Is it just MDMA that's showing high levels of efficacy? I mean, there's increased amounts of psychedelic tourism going to places like South America, like ayahuasca and treatments like this. Are there other?
You see, we don't know what the best drug is at this point. So it's all, some people benefit from ayahuasca, but you hear also bad stories sometimes. And we don't know what the best drug is for any particular thing. That's slowly emerging. So at Johns Hopkins, people have studied psilocybin for depression and stuff. And so people say, psilocybin is good for depression. It hasn't been studied for PTSD. We happen to use MDMA for PTSD. And so we said, now MDMA is good for PTSD. It may also be good for depression. And so it all depends on how the data are just beginning to emerge out of the field. And what's nice about the field right now is that a lot of us say we don't know. And as long as you be in a frame of mind where you don't know, you're open-minded. When people pretend to know, they start closing their minds. So right now the field is really very open.
It seems like everything that you've espoused, underlying it, and I think I know a little bit around having researched your work, but underlying, like even with psychedelics work, they give, the person, the observer, the space, and there's a space that's presented for self-compassion ultimately. Same thing with yoga, like you need a little bit of like taking out some space to give yourself the time to, go, move, work out. Even therapy, EMDR, like it seems like, can you describe the important, like maybe describe self-compassion and the importance of self-compassion when approaching this body of work?
Yeah, I think that's really maybe the most important question for us to talk about. And that is, when you get traumatized, you tend to really have a lot of trouble with yourself and tend to feel like, I was too weak, I should have stood up for myself, I should have fought back, I should have done. And there tends to be a lot of internal self-blame and shame about what happened to you. And no amount of rational explaining it wasn't your fault makes a big difference. But on MDMA, what we saw all the time is people experience themselves back then. There's something about these substances that allows the brain not to not feel the pain, but to localize the pain at a particular time, at a particular space. And you go like, oh, I was so little. And I loved my daddy. And then he did this to me, and I didn't know what to do. Today I would know how to do, but this poor kid was so confused about what's happening, and I wish I'd known then what I know now, because I would have been able to defend myself. But it was a beautiful child to whom this happened. It happened to be me. And that's not where it stops. The most striking finding of the MDMA study to me was the increase in self-compassion and tolerating what you had gone through. Shame went down, self-blame went down, and the next thing, people say things like, oh, and my violent alcoholic father, I feel so sorry for him. I was this really cute child, and he never got to enjoy what a beautiful kid he had. And so the compassion doesn't only go to themselves, it even extends to the people who caused all that pain. Like, wow, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, that is that is really amazing. There's another element in there which you mentioned self-loathing, and they also, like, there's this support that you get from self-loathing starts to cease, or not cease, but becomes mitigated to some degree, can be controlled as you start to do this work.
Well, it doesn't become controlled. No, it really, you get a new perspective. You go like, no, that kid is not to blame for what happened. So there's a real internal transformation in that regard, that you really see yourself from a new perspective. And that's really what the book, How to Change Your Mind, really should have been about, is that I have a different perspective. I see myself different. I experience myself differently. It's not what you experience or whether you approve of me or not. It's sort of nice if you do, not so nice if you don't, but it's not the end of the world. But how I approve of myself is the critical issue. Huh? Yeah. And that changes, yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting because there's this concept that I came across of yours, which is the perception box, and how our reality tends to narrow after we've experienced trauma. And yeah, people rarely come to you like, oh yeah, Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, can you help me with my trauma? It's like, oh, my relationships aren't working out, or like, this isn't working for me, or I feel really stuck, or I'm not able to approach this. And then you help people basically, your perception like box narrows, and then, you support people in re-expanding it.
That's what we try to do, to make people's internal space much larger. Yeah.
What is the perception box? And can you describe that really quickly?
Oh, the perception box is just, I think that's my wife's term. You must have heard it from her. She wrote a chapter about it for the new book about perception box. It's really so the frame with which you see the world. And actually, quite early on in my research, doing Rorschach ink blot test, we really discovered how when you're traumatized, your internal world is very narrow, very constricted, very much preoccupied with threats and danger. So you get very narrowed. You get to be a constricted person. Yeah.
Psychedelics seem to be an expansive tool. When people experience them, they often also mention that, it's one of the most mystical or life-altering experience they've ever had. There's a certain element of spirituality that gets lopped in with them or, connected to them. Have you ever considered, taking time to reflect on, something as, a topic like karma? Certain people are going through certain traumas in their life. Were they meant to karmically face them and move through them? Do you have any thoughts on such things?
Yeah. So ask the question again. I just got distracted by something.
Yeah, it's more around I guess does our suffering have some sort of higher purpose? When you look at karma and stuff like that.
So, the issue of spirituality invariably comes up when you deal with psychedelics. The problem is, though, that spirituality is a forbidden topic in science. There are certain words that you're not allowed to use in a scientific article. One of them is love. The moment you put love in a scientific article, he's a flaky, stupid person. He talks about love, as if love was not the central issue in our lives. And spirituality, of course, the sense of meaning, the sense of being a small part of a larger whole is hugely important. But like Roland Griffith, who ran this beautiful lab at Johns Hopkins, he was very much in spirituality, and he was deeply loved and admired by many people around the world. And after he died, somebody wrote an article about him. Oh, he's just an idiot. He studies spirituality. He was not a scientist. And so part of the reality that we live in is that some of the most critical issues that makes humans humans doesn't get studied.
Any proposals for the shifts, or do you think there is any hope on the horizon for things like this?
We are an amazingly creative species. We also are an amazingly destructive species. I've seen many amazing creative things, and I've seen many destructive things in my long career. So there's always hope. Yeah.
Any final parting words, Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, for those that are tuning in to this particular podcast? Anything that you'd like to share with them?
There has been a tendency to focus on particular treatments, and people say, oh, that technique is the best technique. Different techniques work for different people, but the hardest thing is to find what works for you. And so everybody who I've seen who over time has gotten better has gone on a journey of recovery. And they try that, and they try that. And there are also people who don't get stuck on one particular method, but who say, what else can I try? What else can I discover? And so at the core of healing from trauma is a journey of discovery where you learn to take care of this creature that you are, and you learn to take care of this creature who you are. And different things help different people. So if I say to you, you really should do yoga, it's great. You may say, I tried it, it doesn't work for me. And I go, okay, let's try something else. And not like, you're a terrible treatment-resistant person. Do more yoga. No, if it doesn't work for you, it's okay.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's an element there of the journey, I think, is really an important word phrase to focus on there. Yeah, and I think being okay with trial and error. Yeah, being okay with a little bit of trial and error.
And so maybe the most important thing is to get people on your side who support you in your journey. I think that's a terribly important thing, is that you find a group of people that I like group treatment very much. You find people who encourage you in your explorations.
Hey there, Inspired Souls. Just wanted to take a moment to remind you guys that you don't have to go this path alone. We're talking about community at this point, and we do have the Inspired Evolution Circle here, ready, waiting for you to join. It's for less than the cup of a coffee a week. You can join the Inspired Evolution community, the Inner Circle. Once a month, you get the opportunity to meet guests like Dr. Bessel van der Kolk and ask your own questions directly of the guest in this circle. And then weekly, we gather to meditate, set intentions, feel into heart spaces, and ultimately just connect and share amongst each other. It's serendipitous how these things happen, but literally the day before this recording, it was actually just yesterday in one of the circles that we were discussing medication, support, trauma, and how to work through it. And then serendipitously, the next day's episode happens to be Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. We're having some really deep, profound conversations and not always coming to resolutions, but actually just being seen, heard, felt, and sensed together is such incredible medicine. The community at this particular moment in time, and even just realizing that we're all going through similar things at the same time is really, 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 really supportive. So I'll put a link here for you guys to go check it out. Feel free to join us. At the moment, we've hit 250,000 subscribers. We're giving away access to the community. So please come join us and see what it's all about. See you inside the Inspired Evolution Circle. You don't have to go it alone.
That's it.
I mean, thank you so much for supporting us in our explorations, Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. Thank you so much for your time, your generosity, your presence. I'll put a link to the book in the show notes below. I'm really looking forward to Come to Your Senses when that comes out as well. Retroactively, we'll put a link into the show notes as well. Thank you so much for your time here today. But also, this is 5 decades worth of, this is your life's work through and through, ever since you started with the veteran affairs and your fascinations began, so on and so forth. So, I mean, thank you so much for you and the work that you're doing in the world.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Okay, bye-bye.
Inspired souls, lumen beings, you've made it through to the end of another incredible podcast. It is such an honor to be your brother walking this path by your side. Thank you so much for being part of this movement. I want to take a moment to thank all of you that are subscribed to this channel. Thank you so much for your incredible love and support. Everything you see around here is powered and empowered by your subscription to this channel. Thank you so much. To all of you that haven't subscribed, and some of you aren't even aware that you haven't subscribed. Actually, I found out recently talking to some community members. There's a subscribe button down below. As I'm saying the word subscribe, it's lighting up in the colors of the Inspired Evolution. If it is lighting up, that means you haven't yet hit subscribe. So please do hit that subscribe button, hit the bell notification icons, and join the community. Join this movement supporting love, positivity, and wisdom for, spiritual tools for daily living to support you on your path. Episodes like this coming out twice a week. Obviously, you've made it through to the end of this video as well, so you genuinely do like this video. So please do give it a thumbs up and a like. It helps all the stuff around the internet and how it operates. Let's all those algorithmic overlordic things know that this is the kind of content we want to see more of in the world. So thank you so much again for subscribing, hitting like. It really helps. And continue diving deeper into your healing. On screen now, an episode with Dr. Christina Lopez, functional movement yet spiritual teacher. Also with Peter Crone, the mind architect, who we've had on the Inspired Evolution podcast before. And we've also had Eileen McCusick, pioneer in the space of tuning forks and trauma healing and therapy in your auric field and stuff like that. So take your pick, make your click, and I'll see you in the next one. Go on, I'll see you there.